I want to show you the importance of understanding context when interpreting the scientific literature. So I've made a graph here, and it shows the effect of performing one set to failure in 6 to 12 week interventions. And the asterisks represent statistical significance. So we've got different frequencies of training, once every 2 weeks, once every week, twice a week, 3 times a week. 2 or 3 times a week gives greater gains than once a week, and once a week gives greater gains than once every 2 weeks. But here's the thing. It sounds like what I said was reasonable, but I've already dropped the context. Maybe you didn't notice it. The context is 6 to 12 weeks interventions. So to say that these different protocols create greater gains is to assume that those gains are just going to continue forever, as if I'm climbing up a mountain. If I run up that mountain faster, the mountain will become taller. That's not necessarily the context. It's much more reasonable, especially when looking at the data in whole and just observation as a whole, to say that no, we have a genetic potential for gaining muscle. If you go once every week as opposed to once every 2 weeks, you'll get to that destination a little bit faster. You're going to be putting in twice as much effort, twice as much time to get to the same place, but marginally faster. So when we're looking at the difference between once every 2 weeks and once every 3 weeks, we're talking 6 times the amount of frequency, and maybe getting to the same place 20% faster or something? How impatient are you? Now, there's the further context of just your life in general. So when I went from going once to failure every week to once to failure every 2 weeks, I got much better gains. Does that mean that for me personally, once every 2 weeks is a better frequency? Not necessarily, because realistically, if you're doing once every week, you don't have the time to think through like which is the best exercises and how can I target the muscle best. When I went once every 2 weeks, I started constructing and figuring out the best way to target the muscle. And the way you're increasing volume is not by multiplying and doing the same thing again and again, but by dividing, getting a muscle group and dividing it into pieces, targeting specific parts of the muscle and targeting more specific muscles. So realistically, life isn't like a randomized control trial where you're going to make sure the variables don't change. If you have more time between exercises, you have more time to think and to focus how to better exercise, to create better exercises, which is what I've done in my workouts. And perhaps the results I've gotten aren't that crazy compared to people you'll find on the internet. But 1, I haven't done steroids. 2, I'm not wasting as much time as they are. 3, I don't really diet that much. I just eat whatever the fuck I want. And I'm confident that I've reached my genetic potential and just the potential of my life more broadly and having time to actually think about other things outside of the gym. The reasonable conclusion I've come to is that I'm going to do once to failure every 2 weeks at most. That's my maximum. And we have to further look at the context here and realize that this good quality research has only really been done and published in the lower spine. So we're talking about one muscle. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, that only applies to the lower back. But hang on a minute. What is the chances that the one muscle that this applies to happens to also be the one muscle that we've tested on? That seems very unlikely. And if you further understand the context, you realize that Arthur Jones was outside of academia and he was saying this a long time ago. They don't want to give him a win at all. because it makes them look stupid. They've taken the most convoluted, ridiculous way to come back round to the same conclusions he was doing and he was coming to just by doing very simple, controlled, sensible experiments. And you got to understand, Arthur Jones, by many people's account, was an asshole and was half crazy. That's a further context. If you think that academia is all about science and being as scientific as possible, you're going to say that shouldn't be relevant. Arthur Jones' personality shouldn't be relevant because that doesn't change the truth. But the truth is, they're not going to want to acknowledge the truth if Arthur Jones said it. So that's why I just get that simple, basic experiments and I apply it to every muscle and make things very simple. When it comes to academia, if you've observed it enough, you realize that they benefit from things being as complicated and obscure as possible because it makes it look like they have the scarce knowledge that empowers them. And they don't really want to make things simple. Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the height of sophistication. And I'll leave you with that. Other than to say, a lot of science is bullshit.
Just as most of academic research that your taxes pay for is almost certainly bullshit.